December 15th, 2015. This is the Hermetic Hour. I'm your host, Poke Runyon, and tonight we present another discussion in our ongoing series on the spheres, or sephirot, of the Tree of Life. Sphere number 5, Geburah, the sphere of Mars. And we will cover different concepts and attributes of this sphere. It is traditionally, in the traditional Kabbalah, ruled by Samael, the Hebrew counterpart of Satan. But the Golden Dawn changed the angelic attribution to Kamael, connoting a less evil character for Geburah, or making it a necessary evil, if you will. This necessary evil is reflected in the planetary spirits. The intelligence of Mars is protective, whereas the spirit is aggressive. And we place the Canaanite war goddess Anat in Geburah. Again, we will refer to our texts, Dion Fortune, Gareth Knight, and John Greer, and our own Hermetic Yoga. So, if you want to get tough with the Hermetic Kabbalah, tune in and find out how to sharpen your magical sword. Well, let's turn to page 173 of Dion Fortune's Mystical Kabbalah and run down all of the characteristics listed for Geburah. The title, Geburah: strength, severity, and Yamel, Beth, Wow, Resh, and Hay. The magical image is a mighty warrior in his chariot. Now, we and Michael Greer both disagree with that. We have a mighty female warrior, a mighty war maid in her chariot. And there are several reasons for that. One is that Geburah is on the female side. The side of the pillar of severity is the female side. And Ishtar and Anat were both warrior goddesses. And so in this case, we think it's appropriate to put, and especially because we are into Canaanite mythology, and so we place Anat as the magical image. The situation on the tree, it's in the center of the pillar of severity. The Yetziratic text, the fifth path, is called the radical intelligence because it resembles unity, uniting itself to Binah, understanding, which is in Bria, which emanates from the primordial depths of Chokmah, wisdom, on the other side of Bria. That's the big yin-yang up at the top of the tree. Now, the titles given to Geburah: Din, that's D-I-N, justice, and Pakad, fear. And the reason why they attributed Pakad, fear, to Geburah in the traditional Kabbalah is because they put Samael, who was the angel of destruction and death, in Geburah, and so that was also a good place to put Pakad, fear. But that's not necessarily apropos, but that was originally done. Now, the god name is Elohim Gabor, the archangel, and in the Golden Dawn tradition, they changed the archangel from Samael, from the original Kabbalah, to Kamiel. And Kamiel has a little bit, not necessarily a gentler character, but a less evil character, shall we say. And the order of the angels is the seraphim, the fiery serpents. The mundane chakra is Madim, the planet Mars. The spiritual experience is a vision of power. The virtue, the energy, is courage. And the vice is cruelty and destruction. And the correspondence in the microcosm is the right arm. And that recalls the riddle of steel from Conan, if you recall. The symbols are the pentagon, the five-petaled two-door rose, the sword, the spear, the scourge, and the chain. Yeah, sounds like a little less than M, B, and D. Now, tarot cards, the 4 fives.
The Five of Wands equals strife. The Five of Cups is loss and pleasure, and the Five of Swords is defeat. The Five of Pentacles is earthly trouble. So there, those attributes, the tarot attributes, are rather bad. The color in Absolute is orange. The color in Bria is scarlet red. You remember that's the color in the Minuta Mundi because all the sphere colors in the Minuta Mundi are in Bria. And the Atzura is bright scarlet. And Ashia, it's red flecked with black. Now, one of the least understood things in Christian philosophy, she says, this is Diane Fortune, is the problem of evil. And one of the things least adequately dealt with in the Christian ethic is the problem of force or severity, as contrasted with mercy and mildness. Now, let me, without reading the whole article on Geburah in the Mystical Kabbalah, which, by the way, I encourage you to do, because the Mystical Kabbalah, Diane Fortune did not write a book on the paths. And the reason why she did that was because the paths were still considered secret by the Golden Dawn, and so she wrote her book on the spheres. But I encourage you to have a copy of the Mystical Kabbalah in your library, because it is an excellent book on the Hermetic Kabbalah. Now, what I am going to do is I am going to read a section out of this, but first I want to explain something. Diane Fortune was more conservative in some ways than her student Gareth Knight, which we'll talk about later on. And more so than John Michael Greer. So what she's doing in her article here on Geburah, she's looking at this from a social and even a political point of view, and that's very apropos to what's going on in this country and the world today. And what she's indicating here is, and just like I read you before about the Christian, the problem, the Christian. The fact that Christians don't understand evil. By the way, we had, if you want to search through the archives, years ago we had a lecture on the Hermetic Hour about the magical nature of evil. What really is evil, and who are evil people? And you might want to look that up and listen to it. But because the Christians actually they don't. Christianity just doesn't seem to understand evil and never did. And unfortunately, because the Christians don't understand evil, and this is something Diane Fortune agrees with here, Christian compassion has been exploited, and it's been exploited for sinister purposes, and some of which, and of course, been done by the church itself, using Christian charity and Christian compassion, and using it for the wrong purposes, both politically and even militarily. Let's have a crusade. Well, they had. Well, I'm not saying the crusades weren't in some ways justified. They were to some degree, but then they turned around and had a crusade in southern France to wipe out the heretics in southern France, and the heretics were Gnostic Christians, and this was the Holy Grail people that the church turned on and raised a huge army and went into southern France and perpetrated a genocide, and so this is all done in the name of God, in the name of charity and compassion and everything, and good. And so, as I said, the Christian church did not understand evil and didn't understand who the enemy really was, and Diane Fortune, of course, points that out. She also says that these political trends and social trends go in cycles, and that we have a cycle of overemphasis on charity and compassion and all, and then what happens is toward the end of that cycle, we start having more and more crime and more abuse of all the privileges that are being granted, and then the pendulum swings back, and we have severity and justice and tightening the reins on everything, the economy and everything else. And she's absolutely right, because that's what's going on right now, and it's going on right now in this country. We have as you all know, we have a crime wave going on all over the country, and one of the reasons why we have the crime wave going on all over the country is the government has disempowered our local police, and so so the pendulum's about to swing, because I hope it is anyway. The American people have had enough of a lot of this, and so the pendulum is back, and hopefully it won't swing too far to the other side, because Neon Fortune does agree, and that it can go too far on the other side. And now with that explained, let me read from her book here on the nature of Geburah and the initiations. This is section 6 here, at the bottom of 175. The initiations of the unfortunate Saturn and Mars, and the deceptive lunar sphere of Yesod, are just as necessary to the evolution and balanced development of the soul as are the mysteries of the crucifixion assigned to Geburah. It is the one-sidedness of Christianity which is to blame, and is responsible for so much that is unsound and pathological in both our national and our private lives. But equally, we must not forget that Christianity came as a corrective to a pagan world that was sick unto death with its own toxins, and of course that was slavery. We need what Christianity has to give, but also, unfortunately, we cannot do without that which it lacks. Let us now consider the astringent corrective influence of Geburah. Dynamic energy is as necessary to the welfare of society as meekness, charity, and patience. We must never forget that the elementary diet, which will restore health in disease, will produce disease in health. We must never exalt the qualities which are necessary to compensate an overplus of force in the ends in themselves and the means of salvation, to which much charity is the handiwork of a fool. Too much patience is the hallmark of a coward. What we need is a just and wise balance, which makes for health, happiness, and sanity all around. And the frank realization that sacrifices are necessary to obtain it. You cannot eat your cake and have it too. And in the spiritual sphere, this is true as with anywhere else. Geburah is the sacrificial priest of the mysteries. Now, sacrifice does not mean giving up something that is dear to you because a jealous God will brook no rival interests in his devotees and is flattered by your pain. It means the deliberate and open-eyed choice of a greater good in preference to a lesser good, as the athlete prefers the fatigue of exercise to the ease of the sloth that puts him out of condition. Coal burned in a furnace is sacrificed to the god of steam power. Sacrifice is really the transmutation of force. The latent energy is the coal offered up on the sacrificial altar of the furnace and is transmuted into dynamic energy of steam by means of the appropriate machinery. There is both psychological and cosmic machinery available in connection with every act of sacrifice, which converts it into spiritual energy. And this spiritual energy can be applied to other mechanisms that reappear on the planes of form as an entirely different type of force to that which it started. For instance, a man may sacrifice his emotions to his career or a woman may sacrifice her career to her emotions. If the cut is clean and there is no repining, an immense amount of psychic energy is released for use in the chosen channel. But if the lesser desire is merely inhibited and denied expression, and not really laid upon the altar of sacrifice as a deliberate free will offering, the unfortunate victim has made the worst of both possible worlds. It is here that we need Geburah to come like a priest that takes the sacrifice from our hands. Even if it be our firstborn, and he offers it up to God with a quick, clean, and merciful stroke. For Geburah in the microcosm, which is the soul of man, is the courage and resolution that frees us from the pain of self-pity. How badly do we need the Spartan virtues of Geburah in this age of sentimentality and of neurosis? How many breakdowns would be saved if this celestial surgeon were permitted to make the clean cut that has the chance to heal and to avoid the deadly compromise of irresolution that is like the open wound that so often goes septic? And again, if there were no strong hand at the service of good in the world, evil would multiply. There is a place where patience becomes weakness and wastes the time of better men, and when mercy becomes folly and exposes the innocent to danger. The policy of non-resistance to evil can only be pursued satisfactorily in a well-policed society. It has never been tried with success under frontier conditions. For nature, red in the tooth and the claw wears the color of Geburah, whereas the compensatory civilization is of Hesed, mercy, which modifies the unrestricted force and mutual destructiveness of all that is in the Geburah phase of development. But equally, we must remember that civilization rests upon nature as a building rests upon its foundations, wherein is concealed the sanitation so necessary to health. Whenever there is anything that has outlived its usefulness, Geburah must wield the pruning knife. Wherever there is selfishness, it must find itself impaled on the spear point of Geburah. Wherever there is violence against the weak, or the merciless use of strength, it is the sword of Geburah, not the orb of Hesed, that is the most effectual counter agent. Wherever there is sloth and dishonesty, Geburah's sacred scourge is needed. And where there is a removal of the landmarks set for our neighbor's protection, it is the chain of Geburah that must restrain. These things are as necessary to the health of society and of the individual as brotherly love, and a good deal rarer. Used medicinally and not vengefully in our sentimental age, someone has got to cry out, halt, to the aggressor, and move on to those who are blocking the way. And that someone is functioning as the priest in the sphere of the holy fifth esfera. Now, let me comment on that a little bit. She's obviously very passionate about this. And by the way, if you want a corrective view on that, John Michael Greer is much more liberal in his sentiments. But Dion Fortune, this is in keeping with that attitude that she is expressing is very much in keeping with the nature of Geburah. Because what she's saying, and we have seen over and over again in recent years, is something I call the weaponization of compassion. Marxism is a Christian heresy. We would never have had Marxism were it not if we hadn't had Christianity first. And the big problem with Christianity and with Marxism is both are supposed to be for the people. Both of them are supposed to be for the welfare of the people. But unfortunately, both if when the Christians take over or when the Marxists take over, we have a tyranny which draws its rationale from, we're doing this for the good of the people, and anybody that gets in our way, you know what happens to them. The Geburah is the spear of justice. It's the spear of some people would like to think of it as a spear of retribution and revenge and vendetta and all that, but it shouldn't be. Those are not justifiable conditions to act on. Geburah is the spear of justice. Now, let me read you what we have in our Hermetic Yoga book on Geburah, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Geburah is the sphere of strength, severity, and justice, and the residence of the Canaanite war goddess Anak, who shares a warlike personality with the Babylonian goddess Ishtar, who was also their love goddess. In our tradition, Anak is the predecessor of the goddess Astarte, who was also cognate with Ishtar and shared many qualities and mythical themes with her, such as the descent into the underworld to resurrect her lover, the slain Year King. And the Year Kings were, in that case of Ishtar, Tammuz, and then with Astarte, Baal, and then Adonis and Attis, and eventually Jesus. And in our version of the Canaanite myth, Prince Akkad and the Magic Bow, which you will find in our seasonal ceremony book, we actually transform Anak into Astarte to symbolize the progression of the myth cycle. And see the Unity of Systems article for the Geburah Netzach connection. And of course, in Tippereth, we eventually move Mary Magdalene up from Netzach into Tippereth, and Jesus banishes, when he comes in to replace Baal, he banishes Mot because he conquers death, and Mot has to leave Tippereth and go up to Tahath, Saturn. Anath's necklace of severed heads and girdle of severed hands is a cognate motif with Hindu and Tibetan wrap baldaquinis. We should note that Bronze Age Anath preceded them with these symbolic attributes. Present your previous incarnations, the heads do, your previous incarnations, and your deeds are the hands, which she may remind you of when you visit her. She is the mother of the biblical hero Shamgar. Kusor was his father. She keeps your personal weapon in the arms rack behind her iron throne, and her presence in your throat chakra should remind you that most conflicts begin with strong words, and she will remind you that he whom the gods would destroy, they first make angry. And now, over here on page 86, we have the icon of Geburah with an ox sitting on her iron throne, holding a skull cup with blood, which looks very much like our Moat Mouse cup, and the hook sword. And behind her, Mars rises through this porthole window, and the arms racks here, and she says, we quote what she says to Shamgar. One of these heads and two of these hands will be yours someday. Make me proud to wear them, and your debt is paid. Now, Anath is very unforgiving, and she will tell you when you confront her. And by the way, in our yoga system, you will go into the internal chakras. You will learn to go into the chakras and meet meet the gods and meet all of the gods and within yourself, because in the Hermetic system, the microcosm is a mirror of the macrocosm. You have the whole universe, especially our solar system universe, inside yourself. So when you meet Anath, she will remind you that there is no such thing as forgiveness, and there's no such thing as redemption of your sins or anything like that. It's just life goes on, and what you did, you have to live with. You have to learn to live with, and you accept. You accept and go forward, and Anath is very uncompromising and very military. One thing I learned in the Army when I was in OCS, Officer Candidate School, one thing that they drilled into you is you never make excuses. Something happens that's your responsibility, something that you do wrong, but you never make an excuse. You may give a reason if it's necessary to give a reason, but you take full responsibility for your actions. You have to, because if you don't, if you make mistakes as an Army officer, people die as a result, and therefore there's no excuse. And there's no excuse. There can be a reason, but no excuse. And that's the way Anath is. She doesn't. She's not interested in excuses. She's interested in your. She is interested in your being true to yourself, because she is a part of yourself, and so you want to keep that in mind. Now. Basil Wilby, Gareth Knight, his book, which for most of the Spears, Gareth Knight, who was a student of the unfortunately carrying on her work, for most part, his books have been very good. We've read portions of them as we've gone through this series, but this time, this particular one on Geburah. Basil was into Scientology at when he wrote this section on Geburah, and he starts citing some of Hubbard's ideas, and that doesn't read very well. I mean, and I don't mind. Some of Hubbard's ideas are pretty good and useful, but not in Geburah. I don't think Hubbard should be mentioned or studied in relation to Geburah. Because, there's too much, immediately when you see Hubbard in connection with Geburah, the first thing that pops into mind is regulation number 45. And I think we all know what that was all about. And that leaves that, automatically I saw that and I thought, well, I'm not going to recommend that you read Basil Gareth Knight's section on Geburah. Unless, of course, you like... unless you agree with Article 45, but I don't think that's very good. Anyway, one of the main things that I think we should realize with Geburah is that, as I said, we locate that psychic center right in the throat, and that's right where the voice comes from. And as I said, that. As Anath would remind you, he whom the gods would destroy, he first makes mad. So most conflicts, including wars and lawsuits and all kinds of conflicts, even murders and swindles and all sorts of crimes, they all begin with words. Either the criminal is planning the crime, and that requires words, or if the swindle, and of course in a swindle, obviously that really depends on words, and a lawsuit, libel, slander, that depends on words. War, I mean, oh gosh, all the angry speeches and the accusations and everything that precedes a declaration of war. Not that those speeches necessarily cause the declaration, as we have learned from studying history. Most wars, regardless of what the public cause is supposed to be, most wars have an economic background to them, including the Trojan War. You know, this is the classic war in European mythology is the Trojan War, and that was probably basically a trade dispute that they used. They used the abduction of Helen as an excuse. It was a convenient excuse to start the war. However, regardless of that, there is enough really, really serious conflicts and problems started by impromptu words, either written or spoken, that it certainly warrants the caution. And my father, who was an attorney, told me one time, he said, don't ever write anything to anybody that you would not want to see printed on the front page of a newspaper. Well, I didn't always take that advice, and yet looking back, I regret the times that I didn't take that advice. I very much regret it. And yet, and there's something else about that you should know, is that even if you're right in what you write and what you say, even if you are absolutely correct, there is such a thing as being quoted out of context. And this can really, so if you write or if you speak and you say something in the course of an argument or in the course of a debate, and you say anything that is not that can be taken out of context and make you look bad. This is why you have to be very, very careful about how you say it. Whatever you say that might be quoted out of context, the way to protect yourself in that is make sure that embedded in the statement is the justification for the statement. And if you can't do that, then don't make the statement, because it'll be taken out of context. I think an example of this probably is the Benghazi situation that we're all familiar with right now. This one Republican senator or congressman had said that, oh well, yeah, we did this, we did this we launched the Benghazi hearings to get at Clinton, and he had admitted it. But and he's been pilloried because he admitted it, that they launched these hearings in antagonism toward Hillary Clinton. But what he did not say before he said that, he didn't say why they would be justified in doing that, and even if he had, he still would have been quoted out of context. So you have to be very, very careful about what you write, what you say, and these days, today, especially, we have a thing called political correctness, and this means just about anything you say that is politically incorrect, and it can be used against you to the degree that it can destroy your career, it can destroy your credibility, it can destroy it. Political correctness is well, it's. I think personally that it's gone way, way too far, and a lot of people agree with me. But we still have to get along with it, and we have to realize it. And so Geburah is one of the things that you should realize in Geburah is that you need to have either the Archangel Kamiel or Anaf standing whispering in your ear. Wait a minute now, just before you say something, just think a minute. Just think a minute before you say something, and before you say this or before you write this. And And that's one of the things you really, really need to concentrate on in your mastering of the sphere of Geburah. Now, let's talk about some Mars operations magically. Now, I mentioned in the abstract about the planetary spirits. We're all familiar with the fact that the planets and astrology are very, very influential in Kabbalah and on magic. And Hermetic magic, of course, is heavily astrological, and the planetary aspects are very, very much involved in magic. In fact, that's one of the major things we do. Now, we have in ceremonial magic, we have a planetary sigils, which are based on the magic square system, and these magic squares of the planets are called kameas. Now, you'll find an article on these kameas in the Golden Dawn, and we recommend the 6th edition. That's the one that's edited by Chris Manostre, and that has an index in it. And you'll see the Kamea system described in there, how to make these sigils. And you also find it in Tyson's Agrippa. And Tyson has a good rundown on how these Kameas are actually created. They're magic squares. In other words, you put the square will read the same way in different diagonals, and you get the same answer. That's what a magic square is. And so the way these things are broken down, they have for each of the planets, you have a spirit and you have an intelligence. Now, in each of the planets, the spirit is more aggressive, and the intelligence is more protective and shall we say, more peaceful and more protective. Now, in the case of Mars, the spirit is Barzabel, and the intelligence I'm trying to remember what the intelligence of Mars is Graphiel. And now, Barzabel is very, very aggressive. And yet back to Hubbard a little bit, Jack Parsons, and you remember we discussed this, and this has been shown in a couple of different films, and will certainly be shown when Ridley Scott finally does his mini-series on Jack Parsons. We'll see it again, where Hubbard ran off with all of Jack's money and his girlfriend, and used the money to buy a schooner, and then took off from Fort Lauderdale to sail up the inland waterway and kind of party and whatever on this boat that he bought with Jack's money, and he got Jack's girl with him, and Jack drives all the way over to Florida, and Hubbard's just pulled away from the dock, and Jack gets down on the dock and rolls out his magical conjuring cloth and his little circle and everything, and he does a Barzabel operation right there on the dock, and sure enough, it works, because he calls up a really ferocious squall, and we have these kind of squalls in Florida all the time. They're really savage little storms, but they're small. But it drove Hubbard down to bare poles, and he had to motor in. And when he motored in, the sheriff was right there to grab him, but that didn't do Jack much good, because he couldn't recover the money, and he didn't recover his girl, and Hubbard finally managed to get away. But at least Barzabel did bring on the storm, or at least it certainly appeared that way. And I've seen this both in depicted in the film The Prophet, and also on stage at Caltech. They actually did this on stage, and it was very, very well done. And so Barzabel is your aggressive Mars planetary spirit, and frankly, I want to suggest, for those of you who really want to do something like that, get a steel plate because iron is the metal of Mars. Get yourself a steel plate and put the sigil down on the steel plate. Maybe engrave it with your electric pencil or something like that, or you can put it on with a magic marker. But then very, very carefully trace along the sigil, trace it with gunpowder. And then when you get ready to summon Bartzabel, then just light the gunpowder, and the sigil will act like a fuse. It will burn right there on the steel plate. That would be one of the ways to do it. By the way, if you want to see a Bartzabel, if you want to read about a Bartzabel possession, and I'm not suggesting you do it. And although I have done operations similar to this before, there's one described in Gerald Gardner's High Magic's Aid, and we have a show on that too, where you put the receiver in the triangle, and in that they actually invoked or evoked Bartzabel into this young 19-year-old British kid that was willing to do it, and he was the receiver. And of course, when Bartzabel finally showed up, they asked Bartzabel, how do we find how do we get the power to defeat our enemies? And Bartzabel says channels through for whatever his name was, and he says, find the Witch of Wanda. And so off they go to find the Witch of Wanda, which they do, and then that's High Magic's Aid. So, and then there's another. Then they have another Bartzabel operation in there that they follow. So, if you want to check that out, Gerald Gardner, by the way, was quite a ceremonial magician before he ever founded Gardnerian witchcraft. Graphiel, of course, and this is what I actually prefer, Graphiel operations. He will cast a protective shield around yourself and your loved ones, your property, whatever, and he will do that, and that's probably better. And also, what Graphiel will do was reflect thing directed against you, even by Bartzabel, he'll reflect it back on the person who sends it out. So Graphiel is preferable for aggressive type work. I prefer Graphiel to protect, for protective operations. Now, the energy of Geburah, of course, is either defensive or aggressive, depending upon which one of these planetary spirits you want to use, what direction you want to use them in. And, of course, if you're going to do Geburah operations, the proper color is red robed, and the proper the incense is dragon's blood, and the also similar to Voodoo, tobacco and strong rum or brandy and these various things that are sort of warlike, and of course the weapon naturally is the sword or the lance. So if you want to do Martian operations, these are the attributes and the way you should probably proceed. But I think that the primary thing you should do with before you do that is to meditate on your chakra, do your yoga, go inside yourself, and consult with the Nath, and consult with the Martian intelligence before you do anything wrong. And also too, remember that just because you think somebody is doing black magic against you, I want to say there's no such thing as black magic, and this is red magic, but it is aggressive, okay? So there's no such thing as black magic. Unless, well, I don't know, if you're going to do magic in Saturn, maybe you could say it's black magic, okay? But this is about, Geburah is about as dangerous as we get in the Kabbalah. And, you know, as I said originally, in the original Kabbalah, Samael was the angel, and he was as close to Satan as the ancient Hebrews ever got, and so that's why the Golden Dawn changed it to Camiel, so to be a bit gentler and a little bit less evil or savage. But the reason why because Samael was the angel, that's why they also added the word Pekad, which meant fear, to the attributes of Geburah. But you could say that fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Fear of Samael is also kind of a wise thing too. And then Mathers, some people think that Mathers set Crowley on the wrong path by doing this. But when Crowley was studying under Mathers one time, Mathers found Crowley meditating in a trance, and Crowley was sitting in a lotus seat, young Crowley, and he was sitting in a lotus seat, and he was completely in trance. And Mathers tiptoed up behind him and whispered in his ear, "Samael rules the world." And this exploded inside Crowley's head like a thunderbolt, and he remembered it. I don't know. I think Crowley was a little off before that happened anyway. But maybe. But you know, the idea that Geburah is a sphere that you want to do a lot of work in. No, Geburah is a resource. It's not a sphere that you want to spend a lot of time in. It is a resource for you. It's a resource, and it's like having Geburah, being the master of Geburah, is being. It's like going to your attorney and you know, and saying, yeah, I got to consult with my lawyer to see whether or not to sue this character or not. And so you want to look at that way. Sort of as your commanding officer, if you want to get tough, and also your counselor, if you want to get tough, you want to make sure that you're not putting yourself in more danger than is worth. Now, Geburah, and this is important. Opposite to Geburah is Hesed, over on the other side of the tree. And Hesed is number 4. It's ruled by Jupiter, and it is called, Hesed is called Gedulah, and that's the glory. Now, and we're all familiar with the pentagram ritual, all right? Now, Malkut Ata Malkut Geburah Gedulah Leolam. Amen. Thine is the power and the glory forever. Amen. And that's in the Lord's Prayer, of course. But there's Hesed and Geburah balance each other. Hesed, which we will deal with next time, but Hesed it's the sphere of the king, and Jupiter is the king of the planets, and it's the sphere of the king, and its attribute is mercy, and the king rules mercifully, or at least he should, and so the mercy of Hesed, or the glory of Gedulah, is the balancing and controlling factor of Geburah, which is the aggressive sphere. So the two are opposite each other, and they modify each other. And you might say that Geburah is, of course, subservient to Hesed, because Hesed is number 4 and Geburah is number 5. So Geburah is sort of the king's army, like Hesed there is the merciful king, but the merciful king has a strong army and a strong military chief of staff over there with Anath and with Camiel over in Geburah. Now, this brings up an interesting point. There is an incorrect color usage in the pentagram ritual for some unknown. Well, it took me a long time to figure out why they were doing this, and I never have quite figured it out. But somebody got the idea that when you do the lesser pentagram ritual, you're supposed to visualize the pentagrams in bright astral blue. Well, this is not proper magic. Proper magic is that you use creative color, and a color symbolic to the element of the pentagram of the ritual you're using. Now, the banishing ritual of the pentagram, the lesser pentagram ritual, is oriented to the earth element. And there are other pentagrams which you get into later when you get into the Enochian end of things. There are pentagrams for each of the other elements, and consequently, blue is not the appropriate color to use when you're visualizing this lesser pentagram ritual. You visualize them in bright green because that relates to the earth element. And now, when I first published this and I gave the reasons for it because in this case, green is a creative. That's a creative color, and we use the colors of the Minutum Mundum in the alphabet and in our symbolism. We use it to program the preforms in the esfera in the astral from the Briatic scale on down, and we use it to program these preforms. Now, that means that these colors, these magical colors, are creative, and it's a creative color. And it doesn't matter what the pentagram. Sure, the pentagrams may very well show up when they appear on the astral. They probably will have that. If you saw them later, they probably would have that blue glow about them. They might. But in order to create them, you have to visualize them in bright green. And, I had people, some of these people who were, some of them thought they were great adepts, and they no. And they came up with several half-baked justifications for the blue pentagrams. But the one that I remember that was probably the most well-reasoned reason for the blue pentagrams was, we have to do them in blue because that's the color of Hesed, and Hesed has to modify the angry red of Geburah. That's why we got to see them in blue. Well, I don't know. I don't think that's really gonna. I don't agree with it, but that was the best of all the explanations I heard for this particular idea, and it is true though that Geburah should always, just like the Lord's Prayer and the pentagram ritual, and you say Ata Malkut Ata Malkut Vegedula Leolam Amen. Okay, remember, Geburah should always be balanced by Hesed. And Geburah is that's the War Department for Hesed, actually, when you get right down to it, and also the legal department. So I hope this has given everybody a good idea of the sphere of Geburah and how to work in it, and what the purpose of it is, and it's kind of your your own personal police and court and everything. And next week, of course, we will go on up the Mithriatic ladder and follow the snake on up. And it's kind of like snakes and ladders, isn't it? Yeah. And we'll go on up, and we will go to Hesed, and we will, in its relation to the lost city of Atlantis, and we'll explore Hesed, and meanwhile, good magic, and let's those of you associate members, get on the website there, and you'll find your coupon for the yoga book, and so be sure you get it, because it's part of your training program. Okay, I'll see you folks next week, and good magic.